and
Thank you.
Good morning, Boker Tov, everybody. Today we have as always, a magnificent Torah portion called Terumah. Terumah, one of my favorite Torah portions, because this Torah portion really gives us the prototype of how to live our lives, a life that's meaningful, a life that's happy, a life that's joyful. So let's get right into it. And there's a lot of questions we're going to start with. So Terumah means, anybody knows what Terumah means? There was a carbon Terumah, an offering in the Beit HaMikdash that was called Terumah, which means offering. And Terumah means offering, actually. That's what it means. But also one of the carbonos was called the carbon Terumah. Okay, our Terumah also means to uplift, to uplift. So God speaks to Moshe and he says like this, take for me an offering. Now, right away, you have to ask a question. God is telling Moshe to collect funds, gold, silver, copper, bronze, to build the tabernacle in the desert. They're traveling, right? So they have a traveling tabernacle called a Mishkan. The history is, so when they traveled to the desert, they had a traveling temple called the Mishkan, tabernacle. When they came to Israel, they parked it in Shiloh, and later on in Jerusalem, the first holy temple, Beit HaMikdash, was built as a permanent edifice till it was destroyed. And then the second Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt in the same location and then later destroyed. So we had the Babylonian destruction and the Roman destruction of the holy temples. So God says, take for me. Whoever heard that in English? If I ask you for a donation to build the tabernacle, I'll say what? What will I ask you? Say, what will you, how do you say
Make a donation.
Give me.
Give
me
me.
tzedakah. And we all know that term here. People say, give me tzedakah. Give me a donation, please. Why take for me an offering? Take for me a donation. And the classic answer is God is telling us one of the most pivotal insights into giving. Whether you're giving money or you're giving of your time or you're giving of your love, when you give, you get. By giving, you're really taking. So sometimes you think people are taking away from me. Really, they're giving you an opportunity to give, to take. When by giving, they're giving you an opportunity to take back in a very meaningful, powerful way. In a very meaningful, powerful way. And that's when we used the example of a flame. I have a candle that's lit, and I come over to you and I light your candle, does my flame diminish? Quite the contrary. We have more light, as Margaret is saying. So when you share, when you give, you take. You get more than you receive. And I want to share a story a little bit later, but I want to get on track. And then why is God asking Moshe to be a fundraiser? Since when is a Moshe a fundraiser? You know the story of the rabbi. The rabbi gets up at the pulpit one Shabbos. He says, ladies and gentlemen, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is the roof is about to collapse. And we need $100,000 to fix it. And the good news is the money is in your pockets. So when you give, you get. That's what God is telling Moshe to tell the Jewish people. So now, unheard of in the history of mankind or Jewish people, is there's too many donations. The Jewish people are so generous with their gold, their silver, their bronze, their jewelry, their shekels. Moshe has to make an announcement. Stop, we have enough. You ever heard a rabbi or anybody, organization saying, nobody give donations, we have enough money today?
No.
Everybody's always crying, I don't have enough, If only. So the fact that the Jewish people gave so much shows you, first of all, the generosity. And also the understanding of when you give, you get back so much more. I mean, who here didn't make a dinner for somebody who's not well or a new mother and you didn't feel great when you dropped it off at the door? When you do something like that, doesn't it make you feel good? Doesn't it make you feel happy?
Mm-hmm.
It makes you feel good when you do something like that. When you give somebody something, when you give them a gift and they open it up, and it makes you feel good. Why? It costed you money to buy the gift. You took away from yourself, because when you give, you get way more than what you give. So that's the opening phrase of Terumah. But now I have some more complicated questions. God says to Moshe, V'asali mikdash, why should you collect all this money? V'shachanti b'saychem, I want you to build me a tabernacle, which is a home, and rest with, and you shall rest within them. But how many tabernacles were there? One. How many Beit HaMikdash at each time? One. So why is God saying, build me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them? Plural. There's only one. What do you mean dwelling within them? Anybody remember this? I know we discussed it a few times because it's a very, 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 it's like one of the foundations of Jewish knowledge and understanding this whole concept. What God is telling us, he's not only talking about building that tabernacle in the desert that they're going to travel with, but what happened after the tabernacle, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed? And we no longer have a tabernacle, a Mishkan, a Beit HaMikdash. Does God not dwell within us anymore? Is God not around? Does God disappear? What God is telling us in this Torah portion is you're not only building a physical tabernacle. Remember, the message of Torah is eternal. You are building a tabernacle within yourself. That's why they once asked a rabbi, where's God? I'm looking for God. And the rabbi said, God is within you. Go home. That's where you are is where God is. So God is telling Moshe, tell them to build me a tabernacle, but I will rest within them. Because at one level, we're going to talk about the tabernacle, the divine tabernacle, with all the special pieces of furniture and the exact precise architectural details. But then there's the tabernacle that every Jewish man, woman, and child is. If you make yourself a tabernacle within yourself, within your home, God resides and lives there. If you have a welcome mat by your front door, I'm going to come in. If you have a mat that says no visitors allowed, I'm never going to come ring your bell. Like some people, oh, you didn't make an appointment. What do you mean you're coming for coffee? Did you call me? You're not on my calendar. Did my secretary pencil you in? So God is saying, make me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them. And Rashi says, B'chol echad ve'echad, in every Jewish man, woman, and child. If you make yourself a vehicle for God, and we're going to discuss soon how, you're going to say, how am I going to possibly do that? So that's the answer. So now comes even another important question. First of all, why does God need a tabernacle? 2, we just spoke about the exodus of Egypt. It's all about how we left Egypt and the plagues and the crossing of the sea and the receiving of Torah. That's Exodus, the book of Exodus. How does it now segue into building a tabernacle? What does one have to do with the other? Shouldn't that be in the next Torah section? Why is it in Exodus, which is all about the exodus from Egypt? Shouldn't there be a little bit, how do you call it when you have a little bit of organizational skills here? Let's finish talking about the Exodus. Then we'll talk about building and how to build and what to build and so on. The next question I have, if you look at it, there are Terumah, Tetzava, Kisise, Vayakel, Pekude, 5 Torah portions, hundreds of passages on how to build the tabernacle. How many passages on the creation of the world? Anybody know? When God talks about the creation of the world in Genesis, guess.
5.
People, keep going. People always ask you for this amount. They say, give me chai, Double pie, 36.
Oh, 18.
36 passages about the creation of the world. 36 passages with the creation, the world, and then hundreds of passages on building a Mishkan. There couldn't be cliff notes. Why is that? So within this is one of the most profound, deepest understandings. But first, I want to take one little step back and let's sweeten the pot. So we said that Exodus should have been only about Exodus. But let's see what happens. Let's analyze what happens. The Jews leave Egypt and they don't stop kvetching and complaining, right? They come and they say, they come to the Red Sea. Why did you bring us here? Were there no graves in Egypt? You brought us here to die. What did you do? Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Let us go back and serve the Egyptians. Then they cross the Red Sea. They have no water. The water is bitter. Then they said there's no food. Then they said there's no water. Then they come to Mount Sinai, get the Torah. And what happens when Moses goes up for 40 days? They serve the golden calf, right? Can you understand what's going on here? Constant complaining, kvetching, no show of appreciation for all the miracles. What's going on?
Well,
go ahead, yes.
Maybe by building a temple, they will feel that it's more permanent or that there's substantial. And it's not just abstract, deal. They're used to something real, like a house or a,
Very good. Very, very, you're on the right track. Anyone else?
And more of the mental why we're doing this and how this is going to project into the future.
Very good. Very good.
A roadmap.
Psychologically, God says, did you notice also, which I'll tell you, when you read all these hundreds of passages about how they built and then they made the women's bronze mirrors and copper mirrors into sinks, you don't hear one time kvetching or complaining. No one says, oh, this was so expensive. Oh, my hammer broke. Oh, it doesn't match up. My nails are not working. It's back-breaking labor. You don't hear one complaint. And Jews are not very good with hammers and nails, and right?
Well, they're used to being slaves and building pyramids, so I guess they have some skills.
Okay, maybe.
There you go.
If you ask my husband to change a bulb, he calls the electric company. You know what I mean? Yes. Jewish men in general are not so handy. Some are, I won't say not all. But yet, when they start building the Mishkan, there's not even one complaint. They brought silver, they brought copper, they brought gold, they brought money. No one kvetched. No one said, oh, it's so demanding. Not one complaint. And the answer is, you understand the psychology, as you all hinted at, that when a person is dependent, and every time they cried when they were a crisis to Moshe, there was a miracle. They cried at the sea split. They cried, there's no food, manna came down from heaven. The dependency created not happier people, more kvetchy people, more dependent people. If every time your child calls you and you do everything for them like all Jewish mothers do, they never become independent. It's just, I'm a problem solver. My child calls me, their passport is lost, I'm looking for the passport. My child calls me, we're always solving problems. But here we see a very interesting psychological insight. God makes them now partners. That's why he says, call them not your children, but your builders. To become mature and grow from childhood to adulthood, we have to become builders. We have to become independent beings. So what happens? The beginning of the Torah starts with God building a home for mankind. God creates the world, 36 passages about the creation of the world. And then Shemos ends with the Jewish people building a world for God, or a home for God. So it starts with God building a home for us. only 36 passages. Hundreds of passages, mankind, Jewish people building a home for Hashem. So when God builds the world, God is infinite. What's the big deal? You don't need hundreds of passages. God could do it quick-chock. Even with one passage, God could have done it. But when people build the world, when we build the world, when the finite individual builds a world or a home for the infinite God, that takes hundreds of passages. Because we're building, the finite is building for the infinite. And that is the purpose of creation. That's why we're here, to make a home for God. At that time, it was a physical structure. But now, it's making a dwelling place for God within ourselves, within our homes, within our lives. And that's why, the Bereshis starts with Beis. Why Beis? The first letter is Aleph. Shouldn't Genesis have started with the letter Aleph? God is one. Anoichi, I am God. I created heaven and earth. Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created with the letter Bet. Look at the letter Bet. What does it look like if you draw it? We have a few artists here.
Good morning. Thank you.
You could flip it over a little bit. What do you have? Kind of a
House. We have
and
a house.
the word for house.
Buy it.
Hey,
Bayit Bet. Bereshis. God said, I created a home for godliness in every single man, woman, and child. Bias is the foundation of the universe. Not the shul, not the Beit HaMikdash, but the home. You know why? Because that's who we are 99% of our lives. Who here lives in shul, except if you're the rabbi's wife? Who lives in who lives in shul? You live at home. Like one woman was complaining to me about, feminism and Judaism with the separate seating and all. And I'm like, how often do you go to shul? She says, I said, every week? No. Every day? No. How often? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, if there's a bar mitzvah. So I said, the center of Jewish life is the home, not the shul, because how could you say that your whole spirituality and divine connection is only once or twice a year when you walk into shul, and the rest of the year you don't talk to God, you don't connect to God, you don't have a tabernacle in your life, so to speak? So that's why Bayit, the home, is the foundation. You are the foundation of God's dwelling, divine presence, not the shul. And even though we had the tabernacle, even then it was day-to-day life that defines the divine presence in your life, which I'll explain in a few minutes. Does anybody want to add something as we build on this idea? So again, that God built a home for humanity, a world, big deal. It's God. God could do anything. The fact that we build a home for God is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Because, again, we are finite and we are building a home for the infinite, so to speak. So there was a story of two architects. They were each asked to build a home that would win first prize. The first architect built a magnificent kitchen with a huge fireplace, a massive oak table to seat 20 people, a kitchen that could have 2-3 chefs, and bedrooms for guests, and storage room for food, and like a whole giant family room. The next architect made a tiny kitchen, tiny storerooms, but he made a huge library a huge room with books and manuscripts, musical instruments. He created an oasis of intellectual curiosity. Beautiful. You see, says the second architect, I created a home that embodies spirituality, intellectual pursuits, meditation, prayer. And you created a home to eat, to sleep, to party. So which architect won? Was it the one who built the magnificent kitchen and entertainment room, or was it the architect that built the gorgeous library and musical, what they call drawing room, where they used to play, everybody went into the drawing room, and then they had aperitifs and they listened to the chamber music. And the Hasidic masters, the Kabbalah says, both worlds. God desired a Mishkan, God desired a home in this world. But not only a home that you pray and you meditate and you study Torah and you're disconnected, a home where you're in the kitchen, you're cooking, you're talking, you're laughing, you're crying, you're socializing, you're watching a show, a home that represents real life in the physical world. God did not want us to build a home that reflects a divine, esoteric lifestyle. God wanted a real home, a home where people complain, where people kvetch, where people eat, where people gain weight, and also a home where there's prayer, meaning, value, hospitality, kindness, and love. So the Hasidic masters, the Kabbalists and Hasidus explains God wanted both. And that's who we are. That's why, again, this is so many hundreds of psukim, because it explains how to make ourselves a place where we are connected with our divine self, a resting place, a home for God. I'm going to go now a little bit more into that.
I mean, he was so specific, or God was so specific about what was necessary. I mean, every tiny little detail.
Right. So that's a very good insight. I wasn't going to share it, but you brought it up. We just spoke that God values the imperfection of mankind, right? Because no one is going to be perfect. But yet, when you look at the Mishkan, the details, there had to be exact measurements, the exact color fabric, right? Nothing could deviate. And remember when Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's son, decide to bring extra fire, extra incense, they get burnt alive. They die instantly because they decided to do more than what God said. So God is so specific when it comes to the tabernacle and the Mishkan. So does that mean that also us, if we step out of the way, we're going to be struck by lightning? So when it came to the Mishkan, where God's divine presence is revealed in the holiest of ways, there God demands the perfection. God says in this four walls of this tabernacle, it has to be done exactly what I say. But in real life, in humanity, God does not expect perfection. If you do something wrong, no, you won't, God forbid, be consumed by fire because you ate something that's improper, or you did something, or you lied, or you stole, or whatever transgression. But when it comes to God's Mishkan, God's tabernacle, God's Beis HaMikdash, where the divine presence is so revealed, there God demands a perfection. There's no room for you to decide, you know what? I think God needs a little extra incense. He said only 2 ounces, I'm going to bring 4 ounces. Remember how we discussed the fact that, you're taking your husband out for dinner for his birthday, or he's taking you out, and you hate Italian. But he or she takes you for Italian because they like Italian. Yeah. But if you're taking the person out for their birthday, shouldn't you take them out for what they like? So when it comes to God's tabernacle, Mishkan, Beit HaMikdash, there it's on God's terms in a sense, where God says, this is how it should be, A, B, and C. Otherwise, you're doing what's good for you, not what God wanted, or what your spouse, or what is necessary to keep the relationship. If like your husband hates paprika, and every time you put paprika, you're making yourself happy, which is not a bad thing, but you could do half and half paprika, half not. So again, if you're in God's house and you want to keep a relationship, it's about doing also what the other person or what God wants. That's a relationship. Even though you don't like it, you don't understand it, you're not in the mood. But when it comes to the life in the real world without the specifics of being in the tabernacle, of course we're going to do things that are not exactly aligned with our divine destiny, with the neshama, with the soul, with the 613 mitzvahs. It gets more complicated then. Like when you go to shul, it's very easy to pray with the cantor and the rabbi, and you feel so good and holy. You go home, how many of us are praying for 10 hours like Yom Kippur, right? Is the atmosphere that creates that energy and that flow. But when you go into the real world, you're not exactly sitting and davening 10 hours. You're in the real, you may pray a little bit in the morning, maybe pray a little afternoon. But when you're in God's home, there's a certain decorum that creates the relationship of faith. That not always you understand what God wants or needs, but you do it because God said so. That's a differentiation. That's a differentiation. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
So what is our purpose in the world? To serve God with our bodies or to serve God with our souls? What's the greater mitzvah? To eat kosher or to study Torah all day? Who is closer to God? The honest businesswoman or the aesthetic or the, what do you call it, the sage or the saint? And the answer is both.
Both.
Both. You need the library and you need the kitchen. So what it means is God exists in every part of our lives. When you're praying and studying Torah, you might say, that's where God exists in my life. But when you're doing laundry, shopping, or selling stocks, or you're a graphic artist, or you're a data processor or an IT, God does not exist there. God exists in every facet of our lives. It's an all-encompassing relationship. It doesn't only happen in shul. It doesn't only happen when you're saying a prayer. It doesn't only happen when you're studying Torah. God encompasses every part of our lives. And we see it, and we'll soon see it very much in the vessels of the temple, and the vessels of the temple. But I want to go off, before I discuss the vessels in the temple, I want to go off a little bit on a tangent about something that I think will resonate very much with us. Because this is kind of all a little bit on the heavy side, if you know what I mean. But I'm going to, first of all, so going back to the point again, so what is our purpose? Is to bring God into every facet of our lives. When you're eating a candy bar during a football, during Super Bowl, you make a blessing and it's a kosher candy bar. Wherever you live your life, you reflect the divine presence. You're honest, you're truthful, you're kind, you're compassionate, you're perfect. That's a joke. Whatever you're doing, if a person is connected to who they are, to their inner tabernacle, so to speak, your mishkan, whatever you're doing, you are a person that shines or resonates with the divine energy. God is residing within you. You could see that person is connected. Because just the way they are. That's why, very interesting insight before I go into this other insight. Who remembers the ark? Remember there were 3 chambers in the Beit HaMikdash and in the tabernacle. Anybody know the outer chamber?
The name of it?
The outer chamber, the Chatzer. And there they, had the kiyar, they washed their hands, they washed their feet, the Kohanim, and everyone was permitted to go into that chamber. Then they had the inner chamber. The inner chamber was where they had the menorah that they lit with the 7 candlesticks. They had the inner altar. They had the table with the 12 challahs for every tribe. They burnt incense there. And the inner altar, I said, it was a much holier place. Only the Kohanim, priests, were permitted in there. And the last chamber, all the way in, was called the Holies of Holies. Only the Kohen Gadol was allowed in, the high priest, when? On Yom Kippur. And there was the golden ark. What was in the golden ark? Who remembers? The 10 commandments. Go ahead.
The broken commandments?
The broken ones, the regular ones that were not broken, and the Torah scroll. And that was called the Kodesh Kodashim. No one was allowed in there, only once a year, and only the high priest, because God's presence was revealed there more intensely. So only the Kohen Gadol. And why did he go in? To pray for the Jewish people for atonement on Yom Kippur. And the golden ark had something very interesting. It had 3 boxes. So the outside box was gold. Then there was a wood box inside that box, like, those nesting dolls. It was made of acacia wood, and the outer was also gold. 3 boxes. And I'll explain why soon, but it represents human behavior. Human behavior. What is gold in human behavior? Or in the human
Money.
Wealth.
Money. Yeah.
Good.
But in the human body, you're saying?
And the spiritual realm. The innermost box, which means the bottom box was gold, solid gold. That's the neshama, the soul. That's solid gold. No matter what you do, it remains forever and ever. It doesn't matter if you go off the deep path, if you renege on who you are, you say, I'm not a Jew anymore. I want nothing to do with the divine. I want nothing to do with God. I want nothing to do with any godliness, spirituality. I'm a human being in a human earth. And you could lead the most depraved life, God forbid, but that soul can never be touched because it's a divine and it's God. You can't take it away. It's infinite. It's indestructible. Indestructible. You know what they noticed? By the crematoriums after the Holocaust, every one of the crematoriums had a pile of bones piled up that were not burnt in the crematoriums. And that's called the Luz bone. I don't know if you ever heard about it. You ever heard about it? It's a Luz bone, and it's a bone in the back of the neck, and it's virtually indestructible. So there were thousands of these bones. They couldn't figure it out. They couldn't burn them. So Kabbalah explains this Luz bone on the back of the neck defines the indestructible soul. That's the gold. No matter what you do, you want to burn it, you want to chop it, you want to destroy it, you can never destroy the soul of a human being. It's there forever. You could bury it, you could say it's not there, but you can never destroy it. That's the outer part of the ark. The inside is the wood. Human beings were like wood. One day we're happy, joyous, productive, and the next day, destructive, depressed, unhappy. And we hurt ourselves sometimes. The wood is pliable. Wood burns, wood rots, wood gets wet. Human nature. No one is perfect. That's the outer personality or behavior of the human being. It's normal. It happens to all of us. And what's the top cover of the gold of the ark represent?
God.
Good. What else? Anybody else want to say what you think it represents in the psyche or in the consciousness?
The top cover of the,
So you have the gold, which is the soul, indestructible. You have the wood, which represents our fallacies. We're selfish, we're unholy, we're obnoxious. Sometimes we're great, sometimes, we're giving and loving, and sometimes we're direct opposite.
Does it represent the outside world?
Very good. The outside what? Very good. You almost got it.
influences.
It represents, there's two ways of looking at it. So Kabbalah says, or Hasidus says, well, how do you show your face to the world? How do you show on your best behavior? Your goal is gold. No one knows what's going on inside. You could be ready to shoot yourself, and you come and you say, how are you? Everything is perfect. Everything is great. It's gold is what we show the world. Sometimes it's true that we are what we present, or sometimes it's a total lie. It's a total lie. But what is it telling you? That even though at times you're a piece of wood, you have those moments that you're self-destructive, and there's holes in your heart and holes in your mind and holes in your life, and you're woody, right? You're wet, you're rotted, whatever. But the Torah shows, in spite of your imperfections, right? Show your best behavior. Even though you don't want to be the face of kindness and compassion. Why should I? Nobody's kind to me. No one ever says me hello to me. Why should I be nice? Why should I be compassionate? Torah says no. Make sure that you're gold outside too. Even though sometimes, you're feeling down and out. Don't let your behavior reflect sometimes the pain, the anger you're feeling inside. So sometimes they say, fake it till you make it. So the Torah is saying that life is never going to be perfect. You can always have trauma and challenges, unfortunately, but hopefully not. Don't let your behavior change the gold that you are. Let the behavior reflect positivity, and you be gold outside, even though inside sometimes you're not feeling that goldy. So there's gold, which is the divine soul, never could be destroyed. There's the wood, which is human behavior. We have ups, we have downs. And then God says, make sure who you are reflects your soul, not sometimes the negativity or pain or unhappiness you're feeling inside. I want to mention that when I bring these thoughts from the Torah and Kabbalah, it's not a one-day thing. You're going to meditate on your yoga mat, and now I'm a different person. It's a process. It's a process. It's a process of transformation and the way you look at yourself, the way you think of yourself. But having the knowledge and saying, I'm an ark, but today I'm like really the wood part, reminds you of these things. So it's not like I'm not trying to preach and say, yes, oh my gosh, always look your best, even though you're feeling crappy. Like my mother had cataract surgery. Thank God, Baruch Hashem. She doesn't like to not go out without makeup. She feels so pretty, she told me. So she found a solution. She puts out tinted glasses now, till her eyes heal. And I'm like, don't show everybody that you're not pretty. Reflect that you feel pretty and beautiful about yourself, even though inside, like, I have cataract, I'm not feeling so well. Shouldn't I be kvetching? I'm not wearing makeup today. I want everyone to know how miserable I am. It's not that you can't have human fallacies, but your exterior should reflect what you truly should want to be or could be. That's what God is saying. That's why it's so painful when you hear, I saw a religious Jew do this and this. It's so corrupt. How did they know the person is religious? Because they look religious. So the way you look should reflect who you are, should reflect positivity, even though sometimes inside you're lacking faith, you're lacking certain qualities that you really need to work on. This is, I think, what it's saying. What do you think? Did I get it right? You think? Did we analyze it correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm saying that's
good.
That's the point.
There's a part of that, though,
Yeah.
that can leave people isolated. If you are feeling pain and disappointment, and if you talk about it, you have the need to talk about it with a friend or share something that can let someone else know that they're not alone. Is that, that's also, I think, important.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was thinking to myself exactly that. It's a different point, and I probably didn't make it clear.
Mhm.
The point is
Yeah.
not that no one should see that you're unhappy. It's sometimes it's very important to share, say, like, what's wrong? I see in your face things are not going right. But we mean it in a negative way where you're feeling pain, you're lashing out. You're feeling pain, and your behavior reflects that negativity that you're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that in a positive way to shear and to cry and yell. Like I sometimes tell my husband, you ready for the yelling? But I warn him, not in a biting, miserable way where he says, what did I do to you? Say, honey, ready? I'm going to complain. I always tell my husband, I'm time to complain. Then he knows it's not that I'm doing it to make him feel miserable. It's more I want to share my pain and unhappiness and struggles. That's the difference. Not, God forbid, of course you should share. You're a human being. You don't share, you bottle in, you'll explode even worse. I think it's saying that behavior should reflect a positive approach, even when you're dealing with the wood inside of you, so to speak. You know what I mean, Jane? What do you think?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you for helping me clarify that, even for myself. So I want to tell you an interesting story I read. That this guy Charlie from Chicago got close to the Chabad rabbi there, Rabbi Feller, and he decided, he likes certain mitzvahs. He's going to keep kosher. And Rabbi Feller was so happy. Wow, this is amazing, Charlie. Tomorrow. He says, why tomorrow? Tomorrow. So Charlie goes to his favorite restaurant in Chicago. There's a chain called Superdog that has the most magnificent, he writes, hot dogs, non-kosher, obviously. Not obviously, but non-kosher. So he sits himself down and he orders 2 of these giant Superdogs, which are he loves them. If he could survive on anything he writes, he would survive on Superdogs. And he gets the hot dogs and he's munching into them, something delicious. It's dripping from all sides. And a man comes in and says, can I sit down here, sir? There's no other seats. He said, sure. He says to him, wow, you seem to really be enjoying this. He says, yeah. You know why? Because tomorrow I will never, ever be able to set foot in Superdog again. He says, really? Why? So Charlie looks at the guy. The guy doesn't look Jewish. If he starts telling him that his rabbi convinced him to keep kosher and this is not kosher, it's too complicated. So he says, you know why? Because my family is going on a low-fat, no junk food diet for the next couple of years. And it's also expensive, fast food every day. So we're going off fast food. The guy looks at him and says, today is your lucky day, Charlie. He says, really? How? He takes out from his wallet a gold card. He says, I don't know if you realized it, but I'm the owner of all the Superdogs in the community in Chicago. And I'm going to give you a golden card that for the next year, you can have as many Superdogs as you want. So Charlie says, thank you very much. And he goes home. He calls up Rabbi Feller. I need to have a talk with God here. Said, what happened, Charlie? Said, the chutzpah. I said I'm keeping kosher, and God sends me a gold card. What are you talking about? And he tells him the whole story. So Rabbi Feller says, Charlie, here's the defining moment where you can talk to God. Don't you see what's happening here? Don't you see what's happening here? You were challenged. And next week he comes to Charlie's house and he sees a frame. And in the frame, he framed the gold card as a reminder that he got a gold card, but he's keeping kosher. So when I read the story, I was laughing to myself. I said, this is a perfect example of what God means to make a dwelling place for us. This is what God is saying to us. Is it always easy? No. Sometimes you're going to get the gold card. and you question yourself, like this Rufus, this great Roman general, came to a rabbi in the Talmud. Rabbi, You have no right to give charity to the poor. You have no right to help the orphans or the widows. If God wanted them to be helped, he wouldn't make them poor. He wouldn't orphan them. He wouldn't make her a widow. You have no right to help them, Rabbi. So the rabbi looks at Rufus, he says, Terumah, take for you a terumah. When God makes somebody, God forbid, poor, and you have the ability to help them, God is giving you the opportunity, first of all, to get more than you give. There's a partnership. Why is a God, some people have millions and some people don't? Because there's a partnership. God wants partners in the world. Not say, God, you know what? You made them poor, they should stay poor. You made him homeless, he should stay homeless. You're the one who made him homeless. You're God. God allows us and empowers us to build his tabernacle. I want you to be a builder. I want you to be a partner. I created the world and brought you into the world, and you now build the Mishkan and bring me into the world. It's a partnership. It's a partnership. So every time you think to yourself, couldn't God have taken care of it? Sure. For God could, but we're partners in God's work. God wanted builders. God wanted partners. And this is how we become partners with God in our lives and in the lives of others. Along the same lines, I saw another magnificent story. There's a guy, Dr. Velvel Green. He just passed away. He's my first cousin's father-in-law. He was a professor of certain sciences, and he became from, and his rabbi called him up, heard he was traveling. He says, do me a favor, Dr. Green. You're traveling to Washington, D.C.? He said, yes. He lived in Minnesota. He says, do me a favor, when you go on the airline, in those days they gave meals, order kosher. Order kosher. He says, Rabbi, I don't keep kosher. Doesn't matter. I want you, people will hear Dr. Green, Professor Green is on the flight, and you'll tell the stewardess you only eat kosher, and they bring you a kosher meal, everyone will see, and it's going to make it what we call Kiddush Shem Shemayim, sanctify God's name. He says, okay, Rabbi, I'm going to do it for you. Gets on he pre-orders the meals like, you have to. Gets on the flight. The stewardess is going around. She tries to bring him the non-kosher meal. And in a loud voice, he says, oh, my name is Professor Green, and I ordered the kosher meal. The stewardess said, no problem. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour, no meal appears. He rings the bell. Stewardess says, what happened to my meal? She said, I'm sorry, Professor Green. They didn't give us a meal for you. There's no extra kosher meals, but we'll give you a different meal. And he's about to take it, and he says, no. I already announced that I'm Professor Green and I only eat kosher. How could I now? Everyone will see me taking, so he doesn't. He gets off his flight. It's a stopover. He's starving. He sees a hot dog stand, another hot dog stand. He gets online. But as he's online, he says, no, I'm going to first call my rabbi. He goes to the payphone, puts in the quarter, calls collect. He didn't have change. He writes this in the book. He calls collect because he doesn't have change for the payphone. Rabbi, I want you to know that my meal wasn't given to me. Because of you, I'm starving. I'm now getting in line on the hot dog stand, and I'm buying that hot dog, whether you like it or not. The rabbi says to him, Velvel, his name was Velvel, but Dr. Green, Professor Green, every time we studied together, you asked me to condense Judaism in one moment, in one story, in one lesson. And every time I gave you long and lengthy lessons, and you kept saying, no, I want Judaism in one lesson, on one foot. He said, now is your moment to experience Judaism in one foot, in one lesson. And he hangs up. And Dr. Green said, did I buy that hot dog? No. I turned around, I got on my second flight, and from that day on, I kept kosher, he said. So these moments come to us where we can make a tabernacle for God. It's that defining moment sometimes where you think to yourself, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And that's what it really means. And it's all the time. We're always asked to make choices in everything you do. You know, my brother gave a lecture and he said that people lie 200 times a day. 200 times a day, they did a study. So now I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to lie. Like even silly things like my son says to me, Ma, did you call? So I'll say, I tried, but the line was busy because I don't want to show that I didn't call. So now I said, no, I didn't call yet. I didn't get a chance. I would have right away said, you know what? I tried. Why? Because you want the person not to feel bad. And so many things you can't. So there's always a defining moment. Do you ask yourself, am I making a tabernacle for God to dwell within it and to dwell within me? And lastly, I want to conclude with one thing that I always love to hear, that the whole world is reflected in one raindrop. Look into a raindrop and you will see the entire universe. Look into one home, into one tabernacle, and that will tell you what society is all about. If you have a happy home, a healthy home, a home with a spiritual energy of goodness, kindness, compassion, tzedakah, mezuzah, mitzvahs, that means the society is standing on a good foot. But if you look into a home and there's no love and there's no compassion and there's no kindness and there's fighting and there's discord and there's disloyalty, you know that that's society. So we have to look at each one of our lives and our homes that I am going to reflect what the world is. My home, my mishkan, my tabernacle will reflect the world. If my tabernacle has God residing in it, you know the world is in good shape because it all starts with me and you and each home. It's a ripple effect. Then you know that the God is residing and living with you. And when God forbid you don't have that, you don't have the peace and the contentment and the foundations of the tabernacle, then God resides, but you have to really dig deep because like we said, we're all gold. God never leaves us. It's deep, deep inside. So I think if anything, the Torah portion of Terumah tells us that every physical mitzvah, you kiss the mezuzah, you put on tefillin, you shake the lulav and esrog, you eat matzah, you don't eat milk and meat together, you take money and put it in a tzedakah box. Everything we do in the physical world creates that tabernacle, that mishkan, the divine presence. Because God gave us physical things to bring down the presence of God. That's why we have the physical things. God could have given us virtual matzah. Okay, everybody, go on Zoom. We're going to all eat virtual matzah. We're going to make believe we'll stay thinner. God wanted a physical matzah. God wanted a physical mezuzah, parchment, tefillin, Shabbos candles. God wants us to take our homes, our domains, our bodies, and incorporate it with our soul. And that creates the mishkan, the tabernacle that resides in every one of us. And that's what it is. That's what it is. So with this thought in mind, let's all hope and pray.
I don't know.
Yes, you want to say something? A happy week, a peaceful week.